They laughed when the woman in the ivory blazer pointed at the oil-stained mechanic and said, "Fix my Porsche and I'll marry you." Like a man with grease under his fingernails could never understand a machine built for people who own glass towers. The service bay at Westbrook Motors went quiet for half a second, then broke into soft laughter from salesmen holding paper coffee cups and customers pretending not to stare. Ethan Miller did not laugh. He stood beside the red Porsche 911 with his sleeves rolled to the elbow, one hand resting on a dented toolbox, the other holding a lunch bag his 8-year-old daughter had decorated with blue marker stars before school. Outside, his old gray pickup truck sat near the curb with a cracked taillight and a booster seat still buckled in the passenger side. He had come in early after dropping Lily at the elementary school hallway, where she had hugged him twice because the heating bill was due and she had heard him whispering numbers over the kitchen table at dawn. Ethan did not look like a man who belonged under the bright showroom lights. His boots were worn white at the toes. His flannel shirt had a patch sewn near the pocket. His hair carried a few tired streaks of gray that had arrived too soon after his wife passed. But his eyes were calm, steady, the kind of quiet that made louder people uncomfortable. "Ma'am," he said softly, looking not at the CEO's smile, but at the faint vibration under the Porsche's rear deck lid. "It is not a joke to the car if something is wrong." A salesman near the espresso machine snorted. "Relax, Miller. It's a client car, not your Sunday sermon." The woman turned toward him with amused curiosity. Her name was Claire Whitmore, CEO of Whitmore Biotech, owner of 3 buildings downtown, and, according to the dealership manager, someone whose signature could buy every car in the showroom before lunch. She had brought the Porsche in because 3 certified technicians had failed to explain why it shuddered at low speed, stalled twice near a grocery store entrance, and flashed warning lights that disappeared before diagnostics could catch them. The dealership had promised her a priority inspection, but when Ethan stepped forward from the back bay, the manager lifted a hand to stop him. "Not this one," Dennis said under his breath. "We need certified hands on a VIP vehicle." Ethan lowered his eyes for a moment, then nodded once. "No protest. No wounded pride." He simply stepped back, picked up a fallen socket from the floor, and placed it where the younger technician could find it. Claire noticed that. She also noticed the way he listened to the engine from 10 feet away, as if the machine were speaking too low for everyone else to hear. "You work here?" she asked. "Part-time service mechanic," Ethan said. "Mostly after-hours repairs, fleet vans, older cars, anything the main desk does not want slowing down the schedule." Dennis gave a tight smile. "He is good with rusty pickups and church parking lot breakdowns. Porsche electronics are another universe." The laughter returned, smaller this time, but sharper. Ethan said nothing. He only reached into his lunch bag, pulled out a folded utility bill, and tucked it deeper before anyone could see the red past due stamp. Then a sound came from the Porsche, barely a tremor, a quick metallic hesitation under the idle. Ethan's head turned before any scanner beeped. His fingers lifted slightly, counting rhythm against the air. 1, 2, pause. 1, 2, miss. For the first time, Claire stopped smiling. "You heard that?" she asked. Ethan looked at the car, then at the polished floor reflecting people who had already decided what he was worth. "Yes, ma'am," he said, "and it is getting worse." Dennis stepped between them. "We have this handled." He handed the keys to the senior technician and told Ethan to move a customer's old minivan from Bay 4. Ethan obeyed, quiet as a prayer, but as he passed the Porsche, he paused just long enough to glance at the left rear vent, where a thin ribbon of heat shimmered wrong against the cold morning air. Claire watched him go, watched the room dismiss him, watched him place his daughter's lunch money envelope carefully inside his toolbox before pushing the minivan toward the lift. And when the Porsche suddenly coughed once, then went silent under the dealership lights, every certified man in the room looked at the dashboard. Claire looked at Ethan. Ethan did not rush toward the Porsche when it died. That was what Claire noticed first. Everyone else moved like embarrassment had set their shoes on fire. Dennis snapped for a scanner. The senior technician popped the door open. A salesman muttered something about German engineering and bad timing. Ethan only finished rolling the old minivan into Bay 4, set the parking brake, and placed a clean fender cover over its cracked hood before touching a wrench. Responsibility, to him, was not something you performed for important people. It was what you did when no one was clapping. His phone buzzed on the edge of his toolbox. The screen showed a message from Maple Ridge Elementary. Lily forgot her lunch envelope. Ethan looked at the brown paper bag with blue marker stars, then at the clock above the parts counter. 10:19. He had 30 minutes before her lunch period, a Porsche dead under showroom lights, and a past-due utility bill folded so tightly in his pocket it felt like a stone. He washed his hands in the shop sink until the black lines faded from his knuckles, took $2 from the coffee jar marked donuts, replaced it with a handwritten note, and handed the decorated lunch bag to Tommy, the teenage parts runner. "School hallway office," Ethan said. "Please make sure Mrs. Alvarez gets it. Tell Lily I did not forget." Tommy nodded, softer than usual. "You always pay the jar back." Ethan gave him a small look. "That is why people keep jars." Across the bay, Claire watched from beside the Porsche. She had seen executives donate large checks for photographers and forget the names of the people who opened their doors. But this man treated a $2 coffee jar like a courthouse oath. Dennis caught her watching and cleared his throat. "He's a decent guy, just not the face we put on premium clients." Ethan heard that. He did not answer. He picked up a scan report from the senior technician's cart after asking permission with a glance, then set it back exactly where he found it. "No permanent codes," the technician said loudly, as if to close the matter. "Probably fuel quality or a software hiccup." Ethan turned toward the rear of the car. The service bay smelled of tire rubber, burnt coffee, and rainwater drying off customer floor mats. Outside the glass doors, his gray pickup sat in a row of shiny loaner cars, small and tired, but paid for. He stepped closer to the Porsche, not touching it, only listening. "It is not fuel quality," he said quietly. Dennis sighed. "Miller." Ethan lifted one hand, not defensive, almost apologetic. "The miss is heat-related. Low idle. Left bank. Is breathing wrong after warm soak." The senior technician laughed once. "Breathing wrong." Ethan looked at him with calm eyes. "Engines breathe." That should have made the room laugh again. Somehow it did not. Claire's expression changed by 1 degree, the way daylight changes before storm. "How would you check it?" she asked. Dennis answered before Ethan could. "We follow Porsche protocol." Ethan nodded. "You should." Then he walked away to an older Buick waiting near Bay 2, where an elderly woman from the morning drop-off had been told she needed a full alternator replacement. Ethan tested the battery cable, tightened a loose ground, and saved her $600 before anyone noticed. When she asked what she owed, he wrote only the minimum labor line and carried her grocery bag from the waiting room to the trunk. Claire saw that too. Not the performance of kindness, the habit of it. By noon, the Porsche had restarted, idled smooth for 7 minutes, then coughed again when the rear fans kicked on. The scanner still showed nothing useful. Dennis's jaw tightened. The senior technician stopped joking. Ethan was under the Buick's hood, teaching Tommy how to feel for vibration through the handle of a screwdriver instead of guessing. "Machines tell the truth," he said. "People just get too proud to listen." Claire looked from Ethan to her silent Porsche, and for the first time that morning, the joke she had made in front of everyone began to feel less like power and more like a mistake. Then Dennis shut the Porsche's engine off, turned toward Ethan with forced patience, and said the words that made every head in the service bay lift. "Fine, Miller. Since you seem to hear ghosts, tell us exactly what we are missing." Ethan slid out from beneath the Buick slowly, wiping his hands on a blue shop towel that had been washed thin from too many long weeks. He did not smile at Dennis. He did not enjoy the room turning toward him. Men like Ethan learned early that attention could be a gift or a trap, and in places like Westbrook Motors, it was usually both. He walked to the Porsche and stopped a respectful foot away from the rear quarter panel. "I need permission before I touch it," he said. Claire looked at Dennis, then back at Ethan. That small choice mattered. For the first time all day, she did not ask the manager. "You have it," she said. Ethan nodded once, then opened the engine cover with the care of someone lifting a sleeping child from a car seat. The service bay noise thinned around him. Air tools faded. A coffee machine hissed near the waiting room. Outside, a delivery truck rolled past the dealership toward the grocery store across the street, its brakes squealing at the stoplight. Ethan leaned in and did not reach for the scanner. He reached for a flashlight, angled it low, and watched the shadows move across the left intake duct. "Start it, please," he said. The senior technician folded his arms. "You want to start a dead car?" "It is not dead," Ethan said quietly. "It is waiting for the same mistake to happen twice." Claire caught that sentence and held on to it. The technician turned the key. The Porsche fired, smooth and proud, as if it had never embarrassed anyone under those bright showroom lights. Dennis gave a thin laugh. "See?" Ethan did not look away from the rear vent. 1 minute passed. Then 2. He asked Tommy for a spray bottle from the detail cart and a strip of receipt paper from the service desk. No one understood. Ethan held the paper near the left side intake, not touching any hot surface, then misted the air lightly around a small section of hose hidden behind a clamp. The paper snapped inward, then fluttered wrong. The idle dipped. A tremor ran through the engine. Claire stepped closer before she realized she had moved. "What does that mean?" Ethan kept his hand steady. "Unmetered air. Tiny crack opens when the hose warms. Computer corrects until it cannot. That is why the code disappears. The car is not lying. The test is." The senior technician's face tightened. Dennis reached for authority and found none ready. "That hose was replaced last month. With the wrong revision," Ethan said. "Not loud, not sharp." He pointed to a small number stamped near the clamp. "The updated part has a reinforced sleeve. This one collapses at heat soak." Claire studied him now. Not like an employee, not like a curiosity, but like a problem she had underestimated and now needed to understand. "How do you know that?" she asked. For a moment, something passed behind Ethan's eyes. A door closing. A road not taken. "I read service bulletins," he said. "On lunch breaks." A few men looked away, because the answer sounded humble, but not small. Dennis cleared his throat. "Even if that is true, we would have found it." Ethan stepped back from the car. "Then I'm glad you did." There was no victory in his voice, only relief that the machine had been heard before the owner was sent away with another guess. His phone buzzed again. A voicemail from Maple Ridge Elementary. Ethan's shoulders shifted, almost too slight to see. Claire saw it anyway. "Your daughter?" she asked. "Lily forgot her science folder," he said, already reaching for his keys. "Her presentation is after lunch." Dennis frowned. "You were on the clock." Ethan looked through the glass doors at his gray pickup, then at the Porsche with its hidden wound finally exposed. He placed the flashlight back exactly where it belonged. "I can clock out." Claire had negotiated hospital contracts, bought companies, and faced rooms full of men who spoke over her without blinking. Yet this quiet mechanic unsettled her more than all of them, because he chose responsibility even when it cost him. "Take my car," she said suddenly, then caught herself at the absurdity of offering a broken Porsche. Ethan almost smiled. "Almost. I will take the pickup." He turned to leave, but Claire stepped beside him, holding out the printed service bulletin he had identified from memory. "When you come back," she said softer now, "will you show me how you saw what everyone else missed?" Ethan looked at the paper, then at the woman who had joked about marrying him in front of a room that thought he was beneath the car he had just understood. "Yes, ma'am," he said. "But first, my little girl needs her volcano diagram." And as his old pickup coughed to life outside Westbrook Motors, Claire stood with the bulletin in her hand, wondering what else about Ethan Miller had been dismissed simply because no one had bothered to listen. Ethan returned 19 minutes later with wind in his hair, a manila science folder on the passenger seat, and a grocery store receipt tucked under the sun visor, because he tracked every dollar before it left his pocket. He had parked outside Maple Ridge Elementary just long enough to walk the folder into the front office himself, sign the visitor sheet, and kneel in the school hallway so Lily could whisper, "Did I mess everything up?" He had kissed the top of her head and adjusted the paper volcano under her arm. "No, sweetheart," he said. "You remembered before the lava did." Then he drove back to Westbrook Motors without stopping for lunch, his old pickup rattling over potholes on Route 16 like a toolbox full of loose faith. When he stepped into the service bay, the air had changed. The Porsche was still there, engine cover raised, but Dennis was standing with a tablet in his hand and a hard look on his face. The senior technician would not meet Ethan's eyes. Tommy stood near the parts counter, pale and silent. Claire stood beside the waiting room glass, arms folded, not smiling now. "Miller," Dennis said too calmly. "We need to talk." Ethan looked at the Porsche first. That told Claire something. Even before defending himself, he checked the work. "Is a replacement hose on order?" he asked. Dennis's mouth tightened. "That is not the issue." He turned the tablet around. On the screen was a grainy service bay photo taken from security footage. Ethan near the Porsche before it stalled, his hand close to the rear vent, the angle unkind enough to suggest he had touched something he should not have. "You were told not to work on a VIP vehicle," Dennis said. "Now, the customer's car has a failed intake hose after you were seen near it." A low murmur moved through the room like cold air under a door. Ethan did not blink. "I did not damage your car." "Can you prove that?" the senior technician asked. The question was small, but it landed heavy. Ethan looked down at his hands, the same hands that had carried lunch bags, tightened ground cables, and saved strangers money without asking for praise. "No," he said quietly. "Not from that camera angle." Claire felt the room leaning toward the easy story. Poor mechanic. Expensive car. Desperatement. Simple blame. She hated that part of herself could still understand why they believed it. She also hated that she was not yet certain enough to stop them. Dennis took a breath. "Until we review this formally, you are off the Porsche and off the premium floor. Clock out after you finish Bay 2. Ethan nodded once. "No protest. No anger." He walked to his toolbox, closed the drawer with the lunch money envelope inside, and picked up the Buick keys so the elderly woman would not wait any longer in the customer lounge. Through the glass, Claire saw that woman sitting under a muted television beside a vending machine and a stack of old magazines, her purse clutched tight like someone afraid of another bill. Ethan drove the Buick around himself, then opened the door for her, explained the loose ground in plain words, and handed her the invoice with the lower charge. The woman's eyes filled. "My husband used to fix things like that," she said. "He passed in February." Ethan did not offer a speech. He simply carried her grocery bags again, checked the air in her tires, and refused the $5 she tried to press into his palm. Claire watched from beside a car worth more than Ethan's house might be, and the accusation against him began to feel thinner, but not gone. That was the trouble with doubt. It did not need proof to make a decent man stand alone. Near 4 o'clock, rain began tapping the dealership windows. Ethan sat in the break room for exactly 6 minutes with half a peanut butter sandwich and a paper cup of water. On the wall above the microwave hung employee certificates, sales awards, and a faded photo from 10 years earlier of a regional automotive engineering conference. Claire, passing the doorway, stopped when she saw Ethan's face in the corner of that old photo. Younger, cleaner, wearing a name badge not from a garage, but from Whitmore Technical Systems, her company's former diagnostics division before she became CEO. Before she could step closer, Dennis pulled the photo off the wall and said, "Old junk. We are remodeling." Ethan looked up just long enough to see what Claire had seen. For the first time all day, quiet crossed his face not as patience, but as protection. Then the Porsche gave one sharp cough from the service bay, and every light on its dashboard came alive at once. For one breath, nobody moved. The Porsche sat under the service lights with its dashboard glowing like a small city in trouble, warning symbols blinking red and amber across the cluster. Dennis reached for the keys. The senior technician reached for the scanner. Claire reached for the memory of Ethan's face in that old conference photo, younger and standing beneath a banner that carried the name of her company before she ever sat in the corner office. Ethan stayed in the break room doorway, still holding his paper cup of water, the rain ticking softly against the dealership windows behind him. "Miller," Dennis said, voice low. "Stay back." Ethan obeyed. He set the cup down beside the microwave, folded the wax paper around the uneaten half of his sandwich, and stepped away from the service bay line, painted yellow on the concrete. Quiet dignity looked like that sometimes. Not surrender. Restraint. The scanner failed to connect twice. The Porsche's cooling fan surged, stopped, then surged again. A young receptionist near the waiting room whispered that Claire had a board dinner downtown in less than 2 hours. Outside, Ethan's gray pickup waited beside the curb, rain gathering in the bed around a cracked plastic milk crate filled with jumper cables, shop rags, and Lily's purple umbrella. Claire looked from the Porsche to Ethan. "You know what is happening?" she said. It was not a question anymore. Dennis gave a short laugh without humor. He knows how to sound convincing. Ethan's eyes stayed on the car. The control unit is protecting itself. Voltage drop, heat spike, bad signal cascade. If they keep cycling ignition, they may corrupt the adaptation file. The senior technician froze with his hand on the key. Adaptation file? Ethan looked at him gently, almost sadly. "Please do not turn it again." Something in his voice changed the room more than a shout could have. It was not fear. It was experience. Claire stepped closer. "How do you know our old diagnostics division?" Ethan's jaw tightened. The rain grew louder. Somewhere beyond the glass, traffic rolled past the dealership toward the diner on the corner, where the neon coffee cup flickered in the gray afternoon. "I worked there," he said. "Years ago." Dennis snapped. "As a contractor." Ethan nodded. At first, Claire's eyes moved to the missing place on the break room wall where Dennis had taken down the photo. Doing what? Ethan did not answer quickly. He looked down at his hands, and for a second the whole room seemed to see them differently. Not just mechanics' hands, builders' hands, a father's hands, a man's hands that had once drawn systems on clean whiteboards before life sent him back under hoods and invoices and school lunches. "Thermal fault modeling," he said. "Intermittent diagnostic logic. Mostly for performance engines and medical transport units that could not afford false failures." The words landed too precisely to be decoration. Claire's face changed, not into admiration yet, but into recognition that embarrassment had kept everyone from asking the right question. "Whitmore Technical Systems built the early predictive software in our hospital fleet monitors," she said slowly. Ethan nodded once. "Your neonatal transport vans. Some of them still run version 3. Claire remembered hospital waiting rooms, donors, press tours, tiny incubators being rolled through ambulance bays while executives praised innovation from podiums. She had never known the quiet man behind a piece of it might someday be standing in a dealership break room, eating half a peanut butter sandwich because his utility bill was past due. Dennis shifted. That does not prove he did not tamper with the car. Ethan looked at him then, not angry, only tired. "No, it does not." That honesty hit Claire harder than a defense would have. Ethan walked to his toolbox, opened the top drawer, and took out a small spiral notebook with oil on the cover and Lily's sticker of a yellow star pressed near the corner. He handed it to Claire, not Dennis. Inside were handwritten notes from the morning. Idle rhythm, fan cycle timing, temperature estimate, left bank airflow suspicion, part revision number, and a sketch of the intake path drawn before the accusation ever began. Tucked between 2 pages was a photo from the school mailbox, Lily's science fair flyer, folded beside a list of bills, groceries, and gas money. Claire read the notes once. Then again. The room had gone quiet enough to hear the vending machine humming in the customer lounge. "You diagnosed it before the hose failed," she said. Ethan shook his head slightly. "Before it fully revealed itself." "Why did you not say who you were?" she asked. He looked past her toward the rain, toward the pickup, toward a life built out of second chances that were never handed to him neatly. "Because being right is not the same as being trusted," he said. Then the Porsche's fans clicked on by themselves, the dashboard flashed once more, and Ethan's notebook trembled slightly in Claire's hand as she realized the car was not the only thing in that room running out of time. Claire did not ask Ethan to fix the Porsche right away. She asked him to explain the risk, and that small difference made him look at her longer than he meant to. Around them, Westbrook Motors held its breath beneath fluorescent lights and rain-streaked glass. The senior technician stood with the scanner frozen in his hand. Dennis hovered near the service desk, already calculating blame. Ethan gently took his spiral notebook back from Claire, tore out a clean page from the rear, and drew 3 boxes with a borrowed pen. Battery, control unit, intake signal. "If voltage drops while module is correcting a false airflow reading," he said, "the car starts protecting parts that are not broken. Keep forcing restarts, and the software may lock into a bad learned state." The words were calm, but the room heard the warning. Claire heard something else too. This was not a mechanic guessing his way through an expensive machine. This was a man reading cause and consequence like a father reading a school notice before signing it. Outside, Ethan's old pickup sat in the rain with Lily's purple umbrella visible through the rear window, and for the first time Claire wondered how many brilliant people her world had walked past because their shoes were muddy. Dennis folded his arms. "So what do you want, Miller? A lab? A clean room?" A round of applause. Ethan shook his head. "A battery stabilizer. A smoke tester. A current clamp. And nobody touches the ignition for 10 minutes. That is all?" Claire asked. "No, ma'am," Ethan said, glancing toward the clock. "I also need to call my daughter before after-school care closes." The room expected him to apologize for that. He did not. He stepped aside, dialed Maple Ridge Elementary, and spoke softly near the vending machine while rain tapped the customer lounge windows. "Yes, Mrs. Alvarez, I know. Tell Lily I will be there. If I am late, I will pay the fee Monday. No, please do not tell her to worry." His voice did not break, but Claire saw the cost of every word. The pressure was not only a Porsche, not only a CEO, not only a dealership waiting for him to fail. It was a little girl in a school hallway watching the clock. When Ethan returned, Tommy had already rolled over the battery stabilizer. Ethan thanked him by name. He connected the leads, checked the ground twice, then asked the senior technician to hold the smoke line while he monitored the rear intake. He did not take over the room like a man, proving superiority. He organized it like a man, protecting everyone from panic. 3 minutes passed. Smoke curled through the system, almost invisible against the service bay lights. Nothing. Dennis smirked. For minutes. Still nothing. Then Ethan asked Tommy to warm the left duct gently with a shop-safe heat gun from a distance, never closer than 12 inches. The senior technician frowned. "That is not in the protocol." Ethan nodded. "The failure is not happening in the protocol." At 6 minutes, a thin white thread escaped from behind the clamp, so fine it looked like breath on a January morning outside a church parking lot. The engine was off, yet the truth had finally become visible. Claire stepped closer, eyes fixed on the tiny leak. "There it is," she whispered. The senior technician lowered the smoke line. His face had lost its hardness. Dennis, however, reached for a different defense. "A cracked hose still does not explain the control warnings." Ethan pointed to the current clamp reading. "Fan surge draws voltage because the auxiliary ground strap is loose. When heat rises, resistance rises. The module sees chaos from 2 directions." He reached down with a mirror and showed them the corroded strap half hidden near the mount. "That should have been checked at the last service." Silence moved through the bay, heavier than laughter had been. Claire looked at the notes, the readings, the careful order of his work. Her first impression of Ethan had been a man outside her world. Now she was beginning to understand he had once helped build parts of it. A new obstacle arrived with the ring of Dennis's desk phone. He listened, went pale, then covered the receiver. "The regional director is on his way." Claire's office called corporate about the delay. Ethan began putting tools away. Claire turned sharply. "Where are you going?" "To get my daughter," he said. "The car is stable if no one starts it." Dennis seized the moment. "If you leave now, do not come back to this repair." Ethan paused beside his toolbox. The utility bill still folded inside, the lunch money envelope beneath a drawer full of worn sockets. His face remained calm, but Claire finally saw the edge he had been standing on all day. Then the service bay doors opened, and the regional director walked in with 2 men in suits, looking first at the Porsche, then at Ethan, as if the verdict had already been written. The regional director entered like a man accustomed to rooms rearranging themselves around him. His name was Paul Decker, silver-haired, press suit, dealership badge clipped to a leather folder. The 2 men behind him carried tablets and the expression of people who believed paperwork could explain character. Dennis straightened instantly. The senior technician stepped back from the Porsche. Ethan stayed beside his toolbox with his keys in hand, one foot already turned toward the rain and the road to Maple Ridge Elementary. "Who authorized this employee to perform diagnostics on a premium client vehicle?" Decker asked. The word employee landed smaller than Ethan's name. Claire heard it. Ethan did too. He did not correct him. He only glanced at the clock. 5:12. After-school care closed at 5:30. Outside, traffic crawled past the diner on the corner, headlights smeared across wet pavement, every minute becoming another dollar he did not have. I authorized him to explain what he found, Claire said. Decker looked at her with polished courtesy. Ms. Whitmore, with respect, this matter involves liability. Dennis opened his mouth quickly. Mr. Miller was previously instructed not to touch the vehicle. There is also a question about whether his unauthorized involvement contributed to the failure. Ethan's hand tightened once around his keys, then relaxed. Quiet dignity is not the absence of pain. It is choosing not to let pain become noise. Claire turned toward Ethan. Tell them what you told us. Ethan looked at the service bay doors, then at the Porsche, then at the young parts runner standing near the battery stabilizer, as if waiting to be blamed next. The intake hose is the wrong revision, he said. The auxiliary ground strap is corroded. Together they create intermittent airflow correction and voltage instability under heat. The car should not be restarted until both are corrected and the adaptation is preserved. Decker stared at him. And your qualification for that conclusion? The room tightened. Ethan could have said nothing. He could have let the question stand over him like every unpaid notice in the mailbox, every school hallway whisper every time someone saw his pickup before they saw his mind. Instead, he opened the bottom drawer of his toolbox and pulled out a flat metal case wrapped in an old shop rag. Inside were laminated badges, faded conference passes, and a photograph of a younger Ethan standing in front of a prototype diagnostic bench beside engineers in white shirts. He handed Decker one badge. Ethan Miller, Senior Systems Engineer. Whitmore Technical Systems. Predictive Fault Architecture. The air changed so sharply that even Dennis looked down. Claire took the badge from Decker before he could bury in process. The name was real. The title was real. The dates were real. You designed part of the diagnostic logic, she said. Ethan shook his head. A team designed it. I wrote some of the thermal adaptation models. Enough to know when the software is being asked to solve a mechanical lie. Tommy whispered, almost to himself. That is why you knew the fan cycle. The senior technician looked at the Porsche with new humility. Decker, however, only narrowed his eyes. If you were a senior engineer, why are you working part-time in a service bay? It was a cruel question because it pretended to be practical. Ethan put the badges back into the case. My wife got sick, he said quietly. The rain seemed louder. Hospital waiting rooms do not care how important your job title is. Lily was 4. I chose shifts that let me be there for both of them. After my wife passed, I kept choosing my daughter. No speech could have made the room more silent. Claire looked at him and saw the past-due utility bill, the lunch envelope, the science folder, the careful refusal to abandon small responsibilities for big attention. She had spent years measuring leadership by scale. Ethan measured it by who was waiting for him at 5:30. Decker closed his folder. Touching story. Still does not resolve liability. The words struck the room cold again. Dennis breathed out, relieved. Ethan nodded as if he had expected no less. Then do what you need to do, he said. But do not start that car. He picked up Lily's purple umbrella from the milk crate in his pickup bed and turned toward the exit. Claire stepped after him. Ethan, wait. He stopped under the awning as rain spilled beyond the glass doors. His face reflected beside the Porsche behind him. I have waited all day, he said gently. My daughter should not have to. Then Decker's voice cut across the bay. If he leaves before this review is complete, suspend him. Ethan closed his eyes for half a second, not in anger, but in the kind of grief a responsible man feels when every right choice still costs him something. And Claire realized part of the truth had been revealed, but justice had not arrived yet. Ethan heard the word suspend, and for a moment the rain seemed to stop around him. Not in the sky, not on the pavement, but inside his chest, where a father keeps the small promises that hold a child's world together. 5:18. 12 minutes until after-school care closed. His gray pickup waited under the awning, Lily's purple umbrella dripping in his hand, the science fair folder no longer on the passenger seat, because he had kept that promise already. But another one was breaking. Decker stood behind him with a folder full of authority. Dennis stood beside the Porsche with the relief of a man watching blame travel away from him. Claire stood between them, no longer amused, no longer certain, but not yet powerful enough in that moment to undo the damage her own joke had helped begin. "Mr. Decker," she said, "suspending him for picking up his child is not reasonable." Decker's smile stayed polite. "Ms. Whitmore, the issue is not his child. The issue is unauthorized access, possible tampering, and abandonment of an active review." Ethan turned back slowly. "I'm not abandoning anything," he said. "I am choosing the only person in this building who cannot choose for herself." No one answered. Outside, across Route 16, the diner's neon coffee cup blinked through the rain, on and off like a tired heartbeat. Ethan reached into his toolbox and took out the lunch money envelope, the utility bill, and the small metal case of old badges. He placed the badges back in a drawer, but kept the bill and envelope in his coat pocket. That tiny movement told Claire more than any resume could. His past mattered. His pride mattered. But Lily came first. Dennis stepped forward with a printed form from the service desk. "Sign this acknowledgement before you leave." Ethan looked at the paper. Administrative suspension pending review. No access to customer vehicles. No guarantee of scheduled hours. The words were clean, corporate, and devastating. Part-time hours were the bridge between his daughter's school lunches and the light staying on in their kitchen. He did not argue. He only asked for a pen. Tommy moved as if to speak, but Ethan shook his head gently. "Do not risk yourself for me." That was the message, quiet and clear. The young parts runner swallowed hard and looked down at his shoes. Claire saw it, and something in her tightened with shame. Ethan signed his name with steady handwriting. Not rushed, not trembling. Then he turned to Claire. "The hose and ground strap are both safety issues," he said. "Have them replaced before you drive it. Ask for the adaptation file to be preserved, not reset blindly." Even now, after being accused, dismissed, and suspended, he was still protecting the work, the car, and the people who might ride in it. Claire had no answer ready for that kind of integrity. The dealership lobby felt too bright as Ethan walked through it. Customers watched from leather chairs near the coffee station. The elderly woman with the Buick stood when she saw him, one hand on her purse. "Young man," she said softly, "did I get you in trouble?" Ethan stopped, and the whole room seemed to lean toward his answer. "No, ma'am," he said. "You got home safely. That was the job." Her eyes filled again. Claire looked away because she suddenly understood that Ethan's dignity was not passive. It was labor. It was discipline. It was choosing not to make others carry the weight of his humiliation. At 5:26, his phone rang. Maple Ridge Elementary. Ethan answered before the second ring. "Yes, Mrs. Alvarez. I am coming." A pause. His face changed, only slightly, but enough for Claire to see the wound beneath the calm. She heard. Another pause. "No, please tell her I am not in trouble. Tell her I am on my way." He ended the call, and for the first time all day, his eyes lowered not from humility, but from hurt. Lily had heard an adult say her father might have done something wrong. That was the thing he had been trying to protect, more than money, more than hours, more than reputation in a dealership that never fully saw him. He had been trying to keep his little girl's faith in him untouched. Ethan stepped into the rain and opened the pickup door. The engine coughed once before turning over, tired but loyal. Claire followed him to the awning, her expensive heels stopping at the edge of the wet concrete. "Ethan," she called. He looked back through the rain. She wanted to apologize, but apology felt too small. She wanted to promise she would fix it, but promises from powerful people had ruined enough working men already. So she asked the only honest question she had left. "What happened to the Whitmore project you worked on?" Ethan's hand rested on the truck door. Behind her, inside the service bay, Decker's men were gathering files. Dennis was speaking too fast. The Porsche sat silent under the lights, holding its secrets like a witness no one had sworn in yet. Ethan looked at Claire for a long moment. "Look at the final incident report from November 12, 8 years ago," he said. "Not the summary, the raw log." Then he climbed into the pickup and drove toward Maple Ridge Elementary, leaving Claire standing in the rain with the first real key to the truth. Claire did not follow Ethan right away. She went back inside Westbrook Motors with rain on the shoulders of her ivory blazer and a sentence in her mind that would not let go. Not the summary, the raw log. Decker was at the service desk, speaking in a low voice to one of his men. Dennis stood near the coffee station with his arms folded, looking relieved in the way people look when they think a storm has chosen someone else's house. Claire walked past them, past the leather chairs, past the elderly woman from the Buick who was still watching the doors, and stopped beside the silent Porsche. "Open the corporate archive," she said. Decker stiffened. "Ms. Whitmore, that file is old and unrelated." November 12, Claire said. 8 years ago. Whitmore Technical Systems. Final incident report and raw log. The word raw made Dennis look up too quickly. That was when Claire knew. Across town, Ethan's gray pickup rolled into the Maple Ridge Elementary parking lot at 5:34. He parked near the flagpole, wiped his face with his sleeve, and walked through the school hallway like a man entering a courtroom where the only judge who mattered wore a backpack with a broken zipper. Lily was sitting on a bench outside the office, holding her purple umbrella in both hands. Her eyes were red. "Daddy," she whispered, "they said you might have broken a rich lady's car." Ethan knelt in front of her, heedless of the wet floor beneath his knees. "I did not," he said. "No drama. No bitterness. Just truth." Lily searched his face, then nodded because children know the weight of honesty before adults teach them doubt. He helped her in her coat, thanked Mrs. Alvarez, and gave the office the $2 he had borrowed from the coffee jar earlier. "You did not have to do that today," the secretary said gently. Ethan smiled tiredly. "That is why I had to." Back at Westbrook Motors, the raw log opened on Decker's tablet. Lines of data filled the screen: thermal spikes, voltage drops, simulation overrides, timestamps, internal notes. Claire read slowly at first, then faster. 8 years ago, during final testing of a Whitmore diagnostic platform, Ethan Miller had flagged a safety problem in the adaptation logic. His notes warned that a reset under unstable voltage could hide a mechanical failure instead of revealing it. The summary report said the issue had been resolved by management review. The raw log said something else. Ethan had refused to approve the release until a safeguard was added. His access was removed the next morning. 2 weeks later, the safeguard appeared in the final build under another supervisor's name. Claire looked at Dennis, then at Decker. The service bay lights buzzed overhead. Outside, the diner sign flickered through the wet glass. No one spoke. Then Tommy, small-voiced but brave, lifted Ethan's spiral notebook from the tool cart. His notes today matched the old warning, he said. Voltage instability before reset. Mechanical lie. He was trying to stop us from making the same mistake. The senior technician swallowed hard. If we had restarted it again, we might have wiped the evidence and blamed him. The room went silent. Not quiet. Silent. The kind of silence that arrives when pride finally runs out of places to hide. Claire turned to Decker. Reinstate him. Decker began to object, but Claire's voice did not rise. It did not need to. Fully, with an apology in writing. And preserve every camera angle, every service record, and every log from today. Dennis's face lost color. Claire looked at him last. You removed the conference photo because you knew who he was. Dennis said nothing. That was answer enough. The next morning, Ethan arrived at the dealership because responsibility still arrived even when respect was late. His pickup eased into the same spot by the curb. Lily's science fair ribbon hung from the rearview mirror, blue and crooked, more valuable than any badge in his metal case. He stepped into the service bay carrying his toolbox, expecting cold eyes. Instead, he found the Porsche repaired with the correct hose laid beside the old fail part, the auxiliary ground strap replaced, and the full staff gathered near Bay 1. Claire stood in front of them with Ethan's old Whitmore badge in one hand and his spiral notebook in the other. Mr. Miller, she said, and the use of his name changed the air. Yesterday this room judged your clothes, your title, your truck, and your silence. We were wrong. Ethan looked down, uncomfortable with public praise, but he did not retreat. Claire continued, You protected my car when we mocked you. You protected the truth when we doubted you. You protected your daughter when we threatened your job. That is not just competence. That is character. No one laughed now. The senior technician stepped forward and offered his hand. Tommy smiled like someone who had just seen justice become real. Even the elderly Buick customer had returned, standing near the waiting room with a paper bag from the grocery store. "For your little girl," she said, handing Ethan a box of cookies. Ethan accepted it with both hands, his eyes soft. Claire offered him a position then, not charity, not a fairy tale, but a choice. Lead a new diagnostics integrity program for Whitmore Service Partners, with hours that respected school pickup and a salary that could keep the lights on without a past due stamp sitting in his mailbox. Ethan did not answer quickly. He asked if Tommy could be trained. He asked if technicians would be taught to listen before replacing parts. He asked if every report would include the raw log. Claire smiled, not because she had won him over, but because she finally understood him. "Yes," she said. Weeks later, the red Porsche returned to the dealership not as a problem, but as proof. Ethan stood beside it in a clean work shirt. Lily doing homework at a small desk Claire had placed near the office window. The old joke about marriage had become something gentler and truer. Not romance rushed by spectacle, but respect earned in the hard light of ordinary days. Claire brought coffee from the diner across the street and set one cup near Ethan's notebook. "You still hear things before the machines do," she said. Ethan looked through the glass at his pickup, at his daughter, at a room that had finally learned to see him. "No," he said quietly. "I just learned a long time ago that everything worth saving speaks softly first. And in that simple truth lived the whole miracle. Dignity does not need to shout. Integrity does not need an audience. And sometimes the strongest man in the room is the one who keeps doing the right thing until the world grows quiet enough to recognize him."